Welcome to English History and Listening Practice, where history comes alive and English becomes easier to understand. Discover the rise and fall of great civilizations, legendary leaders, mysterious events, and unforgettable moments from the past, all through clear and engaging English narration. So put on your headphones, improve your listening skills, and explore history, one story at a time. Let's begin. In the late 16th century, Europe was entering an age of exploration unlike anything the world had ever seen. Powerful kingdoms competed to discover new lands, establish trade routes, and build overseas empires. Spain had already gained enormous wealth from its colonies in the Americas, while Portugal dominated important sea routes to Africa and Asia. England, however, was determined not to be left behind. Queen Elizabeth I dreamed of expanding English influence across the Atlantic. Her advisors believed that establishing colonies in North America would strengthen England's economy, provide strategic military bases, and challenge Spanish dominance in the New World. Yet no one knew exactly what awaited those who crossed the vast Atlantic Ocean. Among the most ambitious supporters of this dream was Sir Walter Raleigh, an English explorer, soldier, and favorite of Queen Elizabeth I. Although Raleigh never personally visited the colony that would later bear his name, he received royal permission to establish English settlements in North America. His goal was ambitious. England would build its first permanent colony in the New World. It would become a center for trade, a base for exploration, and the beginning of an English empire that might one day rival Spain itself. The chosen location was an island off the coast of present-day North Carolina, known today as Roanoke Island. At first glance, the island appeared promising. Dense forests provided timber. Nearby waters offered fish. The surrounding coastline could support ships. Native American communities already lived in the region, demonstrating that survival there was possible. In 1585, the first English expedition arrived under the leadership of Sir Richard Grenville. Rather than bringing families prepared for permanent settlement, this expedition consisted mainly of soldiers and explorers. They built a small fort and began investigating the surrounding area. Relations with some Native American tribes were initially friendly. Local leaders exchanged gifts with the newcomers. Food was shared. Information about the land was exchanged. However, misunderstandings soon developed. Cultural differences created tension. Competition over food and supplies increased. Small disagreements gradually became larger conflicts. The English expected regular supplies from England. When those supplies failed to arrive on time, conditions became increasingly difficult. Food shortages grew serious. Some colonists blamed local tribes. Violence followed. By 1586, the first colony had largely failed. When English naval commander Sir Francis Drake arrived in the area after campaigns against Spain, many settlers accepted the opportunity to return home. The first attempt to establish Roanoke had ended in disappointment. Yet England refused to abandon its dream. The following year, Raleigh organized another expedition. This time, the plan was different. Instead of soldiers alone, the colony would include families, men, women, children, farmers, craftsmen, people prepared to build a permanent community rather than simply explore. The expedition was led by John White, an experienced artist and mapmaker who had participated in earlier voyages to North America. White understood the challenges facing the settlers. He had seen both the opportunities and the dangers of the new land. In 1587, approximately 115 colonists sailed across the Atlantic. Among them was White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, who was pregnant during the journey. The voyage itself was long and difficult. Storms battered the ships, fresh water became limited, food spoiled, disease threatened everyone aboard. Weeks passed before finally land appeared on the horizon. When the settlers reached Roanoke Island, they hoped to establish a peaceful and lasting home. One remarkable event soon followed. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter. The child was named Virginia Dare. She became the first English child born in North America. Her birth represented hope, a symbol that England's dream of creating a permanent colony might finally succeed. Today, Virginia Dare remains one of the most famous figures associated with the Roanoke mystery. The settlers immediately began constructing homes. Wooden buildings rose among the trees. Fields were prepared for farming. Hunters entered surrounding forests. Every day required hard physical labor. Unlike England, where towns and villages already existed, the colonists had to create everything from the beginning: shelter, food, security, tools. Every resource demanded effort. Despite these challenges, survival depended not only upon hard work, but also upon relationships with the Native American peoples living nearby. Several tribes occupied the surrounding region. Among them were the CROATOAN, led by Chief Manteo. Unlike some neighboring groups, Manteo had previously developed friendly relations with English explorers. He had even traveled to England, learned some English customs, and returned to America. Because of his cooperation, the English hoped he would help establish peaceful communication with local communities. Not all relationships remained friendly. Old conflicts from the earlier colonies still affected attitudes. Some Native American leaders remembered violence committed during previous English expeditions. Trust was fragile. Misunderstandings remained common. Small disputes could quickly become dangerous. The settlers also faced environmental challenges. The growing season differed from England's. Unfamiliar crops required new farming techniques. Local wildlife behaved differently. The climate was hotter and more humid than many colonists expected. Mosquitoes spread disease. Storms threatened buildings. Every mistake carried serious consequences. Food quickly became the colony's greatest concern. The settlers had not yet produced sufficient harvests to sustain themselves. Fishing and hunting helped, but supplies remained uncertain. Without regular shipments from England, starvation became a real possibility. Recognizing these dangers, the colonists asked John White to return to England for additional supplies. White hesitated. He did not want to leave his family behind. His daughter, Eleanor, his granddaughter, Virginia, friends who depended upon his leadership. But the colony desperately needed food, tools, seeds, weapons, clothing, and reinforcements. Finally, White agreed. He believed the journey would be brief. He expected to return within a few months. In late 1587, John White sailed back across the Atlantic. He promised the settlers he would return as quickly as possible. None of them could imagine that this farewell would become one of history's most haunting moments. White's return to England could not have come at a worse time. Relations between England and Spain had reached a breaking point. King Philip II of Spain prepared a massive invasion fleet known as the Spanish Armada. England faced the greatest military threat in its history. Queen Elizabeth ordered nearly every available ship to remain in English waters for national defense. Private vessels were requisitioned. Merchant ships were delayed. Military preparations consumed the country's resources. White desperately tried to organize another voyage to Roanoke. Again and again his plans failed. Ships were unavailable, funding disappeared, political priorities changed. England came first. In 1588, the English Navy defeated the Spanish Armada in one of history's most significant naval victories. Although the immediate danger passed, England remained deeply involved in conflict with Spain. Transatlantic voyages continued to face delays. Months turned into years. John White remained trapped in England. Every passing season increased his fear for the colonists. He worried constantly about his daughter and granddaughter. Were they safe? Did they have enough food? Had they established peace with local tribes? Or had disaster already struck? Unable to help, White could do nothing except wait for another opportunity to sail. Finally, in 1590, nearly 3 years after leaving Roanoke, John White secured passage back to North America. Hope filled his heart. He imagined embracing his family once again. Perhaps the colony had grown stronger. Perhaps Virginia Dare was now a lively 3-year-old child running among newly built homes. Perhaps the settlement had become the successful English community everyone had dreamed about. As White's ship approached Roanoke Island, excitement spread among the crew. Smoke from cooking fires should have been visible. Children should have been playing. Voices should have echoed through the settlement. Instead, the shoreline appeared strangely silent. No welcoming party waited on the beach. No boats approached. No signs of ordinary life could be seen. White stepped ashore and walked toward the colony. The houses were empty. The settlement had been abandoned. The people had vanished. More than 100 men, women, and children, including his own daughter and granddaughter, had disappeared without leaving any obvious trace. Only one mysterious clue remained. Carved into a wooden post was a single word: CROATOAN. Nearby, the letters CROW had been carved into a tree. No bodies, no signs of battle, no written explanation, only one word. What happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? That question has remained unanswered for more than 4 centuries, becoming one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. In the next chapter, we will follow John White's desperate search, examine the mysterious clue left behind, and explore the many theories that attempt to explain the fate of the lost colony of Roanoke. When John White stepped onto Roanoke Island in August 1590, he expected to find a struggling colony desperately waiting for supplies. Instead, he found silence. The settlement that had once been filled with the sounds of families, children, and builders had vanished. There were no voices, no smoke rising from cooking fires, no guards standing watch, no livestock wandering between the houses. The colony was simply empty. White carefully walked through the settlement, hoping to find signs that the colonists had survived. The houses had been dismantled rather than burned. Wooden structures appeared to have been taken apart methodically, suggesting that the settlers had not fled in panic. Instead, it looked as though they had intentionally packed their belongings and moved somewhere else. This discovery gave White a small sense of hope. Before leaving the colony in 1587, White and the settlers had agreed on a simple plan. If the colonists ever decided to relocate, they would carve the name of their destination into a tree or a post. If they were forced to leave because of danger or attack, they would also carve a Maltese cross beside the message to indicate that they had departed under distress. As White searched the abandoned settlement, he found the word CROATOAN. It had been carved clearly into one of the wooden posts surrounding the fort. Nearby, only the letters CRO appeared carved into a tree. Most importantly, there was no Maltese cross. To White, this seemed encouraging. It suggested that the colonists had left voluntarily rather than being attacked. The word CROATOAN referred to CROATOAN Island, known today as Hatteras Island, located about 50 miles south of Roanoke. The CROATOAN people, led by Chief Manteo, had previously maintained friendly relations with the English. White immediately believed the colonists had relocated there. He desperately wanted to sail to CROATOAN Island and search for them. But fate intervened once again. A powerful storm approached the coast. The ship's captains feared being trapped among dangerous shoals and rough seas. Despite White's desperate pleas, they refused to continue the search. The expedition left the American coast. John White never returned to Roanoke again. He never learned the fate of his daughter, Eleanor. He never discovered what happened to his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in North America. The mystery remained unsolved. For years, many people assumed the colonists had been massacred. Some Native American tribes were hostile toward English settlements. Violence had occurred before. Could the entire colony have been attacked? At first, this seemed possible, but the evidence did not support a sudden massacre. No bodies were found, no burned buildings, no signs of large-scale fighting, no weapons scattered across the settlement. Everything suggested an orderly departure rather than a violent disaster. Another possibility soon emerged. Perhaps the settlers had simply joined the CROATOAN people. This theory became one of the oldest and remains one of the strongest. The colonists had known Chief Manteo. The CROATOAN had previously helped English explorers survive. Food shortages threatened the colony. Moving to CROATOAN Island may have been their best chance for survival. If this happened, the settlers may gradually have adopted Native American customs while introducing English tools, farming methods, and language. Over time, the two communities could have become one. Centuries later, some European travelers reported meeting Native American groups whose members possessed unusual features: gray or blue eyes, European-style surnames, stories describing ancestors who arrived from across the sea. These accounts fascinated historians. However, many of these reports were based on oral traditions rather than direct historical evidence. They remain intriguing but inconclusive. Another theory suggests the settlers attempted to move inland. Some English explorers believed fertile land existed farther from the coast. Perhaps the settlers hoped to escape hurricanes and improve farming conditions. If they traveled inland, they would have entered unfamiliar territory occupied by different Native American tribes. Survival would have become extremely difficult. Disease, conflict, starvation, or gradual assimilation into local communities. Any combination of these factors could explain why the colony disappeared. Historians have also considered the possibility of famine. The colony depended heavily on supplies from England. When John White failed to return for 3 years, food shortages likely became severe. Without enough crops or successful trade, survival would have required dramatic action. Remaining at Roanoke simply may have become impossible. There were also rumors involving Spain. During the late 16th century, England and Spain were bitter enemies. Spanish forces had already destroyed French settlements in Florida. Some historians wondered whether Spanish soldiers located and eliminated the Roanoke Colony. Spanish records, however, provide little support for this theory. Spanish expeditions searched for English settlements, but found no convincing evidence that Roanoke had become an active colony. Most historians, therefore, consider a Spanish attack unlikely. The mystery only deepened as time passed. New English colonies were established in North America. The most famous was Jamestown, founded in 1607, 20 years after Roanoke. Some Jamestown leaders questioned local Native American tribes about the missing colonists. One important source came from Chief Powhatan, leader of a powerful confederation. According to English reports, Powhatan claimed that his warriors had attacked a settlement of Europeans living among another tribe before the English arrived at Jamestown. He allegedly presented English-made objects as evidence. Some historians believe this account may refer to survivors from Roanoke. Others remain skeptical. The evidence is uncertain. Powhatan may have exaggerated his victories. English interpreters may have misunderstood his statements, or the object may have reached his people through trade rather than warfare. Another clue emerged from maps created by John White himself. In recent decades, researchers examined one of White's original maps using modern imaging technology. Beneath a small patch covering part of the map, historians discovered what appeared to be the symbol of a hidden fort. Some believe White secretly marked a possible relocation site for the colony. If true, the settlers may have attempted to establish a second settlement farther inland. This discovery encouraged new archaeological investigations. Excavations in North Carolina have uncovered small numbers of 16th-century English artifacts, pottery fragments, metal tools, weapons. These discoveries suggest that some English people may indeed have lived beyond Roanoke Island. However, the evidence remains incomplete. Finding a few English objects does not necessarily prove that all 115 colonists relocated there. Trade between Native Americans and Europeans could also explain some artifacts. Archaeology has therefore provided fascinating clues, but not a final answer. One of the most emotional aspects of the mystery remains the fate of Virginia Dare. As the first English child born in North America, she became a symbol of hope. Later generations transformed her into a legendary figure. Some stories claimed she survived and lived among Native Americans. Others imagined tragic endings. Poems, novels, paintings, even operas celebrated her story. Yet history tells us almost nothing about her actual life after 1587. She simply disappeared alongside the rest of the colony. Perhaps that is why the Roanoke mystery has remained so powerful. Unlike many historical disasters, there is no final scene, no battlefield, no shipwreck, no written diary describing the last days. Instead, history stops abruptly. One day, a community existed. 3 years later, it was gone. No clear explanation, no confirmed graves, no surviving eyewitness accounts. Only one carved word: CROATOAN. For more than 430 years, historians, archaeologists, and researchers have continued searching for answers. Every new discovery raises fresh possibilities. Every excavation uncovers additional clues, yet none has solved the mystery completely. Did the settlers peacefully join Native American communities? Did disease slowly reduce their numbers? Did they establish another settlement that later disappeared? Or did several different events occur, affecting different groups of colonists in different ways? Today, many historians believe the last explanation may be the most likely. Rather than one dramatic event, the colony may have fragmented. Some families could join friendly tribes, others may have traveled inland, some may have died from disease or starvation. Over time, the surviving colonists gradually disappeared into the larger population of Native American communities. If that happened, the lost colony was never truly lost. Its people simply became part of another culture. But proving that theory requires stronger evidence than historians currently possess. The search, therefore, continues. And with every archaeological discovery, one of America's oldest mysteries comes a little closer to being understood, while still refusing to reveal its final secret. The mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke has endured for more than 4 centuries because it represents one of history's rarest events, a community of over 100 men, women, and children seemingly disappeared without leaving a clear record of what became of them. Despite decades of archaeological research, historical investigation, and scientific analysis, no single explanation has been universally accepted. Yet modern research has changed the way historians think about the mystery. Rather than searching for one dramatic event, many experts now believe the disappearance was likely the result of several different events occurring over time. The colonists probably did not all meet the same fate. Some may have joined friendly Native American communities. Others may have moved inland in search of better farmland. Some likely died from disease, starvation, or harsh environmental conditions. A few may even have attempted to return to England aboard passing ships. Instead of one mystery, Roanoke may actually be many smaller mysteries combined. One of the strongest pieces of evidence continues to be the word CROATOAN. John White himself had agreed with the settlers that if they moved voluntarily, they would leave the name of their destination. Only if they left under attack would they carve a Maltese cross beside the message. When White returned in 1590, no cross was present. This suggests the colonists intended for him to understand that they had relocated willingly. The most likely destination was CROATOAN Island, home of Chief Monteo and his people. Because Monteo had long maintained friendly relations with the English, joining the CROATOAN may have offered the colonists their best chance of survival. In recent decades, archaeology has provided intriguing new clues. Excavations on Hatteras Island, the modern name for CROATOAN Island, have uncovered 16th century English pottery, metal tools, gun parts, and other artifacts dating to the Roanoke period. These discoveries suggest that English settlers may indeed have lived among the Native Americans. However, archaeologists cannot yet prove that these artifacts belonged specifically to the lost colony. Trade between Europeans and Native Americans could also explain some of the objects. Another exciting discovery emerged from one of John White's original maps. Using advanced imaging technology, researchers found a hidden symbol beneath a small patch on the map. The symbol appeared to indicate a possible fort farther inland. This finding inspired new excavations in North Carolina, where additional English artifacts have been recovered. Again, the evidence is promising, but not conclusive. History rarely provides perfect answers. The lost colony is a reminder that the past is often incomplete. Documents are lost, buildings disappear, artifacts decay, human memories fade. Sometimes only fragments survive, and historians must reconstruct entire stories from those fragments. DNA research has also entered the investigation. Scientists have explored whether descendants of the lost colony might still exist among Native American communities or later colonial families. So far, no definitive genetic evidence has solved the mystery, but advances in DNA technology continue to offer hope that future discoveries may provide clearer answers. The lost colony has had a lasting influence on American culture. Books, films, television series, novels, and documentaries have imagined countless explanations. Some tell stories of secret massacres. Others describe supernatural disappearances. Legends speak of ghosts wandering Roanoke Island. Some writers even connect the mystery to curses, hidden civilizations, or unexplained forces. These stories are entertaining, but they remain works of imagination rather than established history. The real mystery is compelling enough without supernatural explanations. A group of ordinary people crossed an unknown ocean to build a better future. They faced disease, isolation, hunger, unfamiliar climates, and uncertain relationships with neighboring communities. When help failed to arrive, they made difficult decisions. Those decisions changed their lives forever. Perhaps the greatest tragedy belongs to John White. He returned to England believing he would be gone only a few months. Instead, war delayed his return for 3 years. When he finally reached Roanoke, he discovered only silence. His daughter, Eleanor Dare, had vanished. His granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in North America, was gone. White searched desperately for answers, but storms forced his expedition to abandon the search. He never saw his family again. Imagine carrying that uncertainty for the rest of your life, never knowing whether your loved ones survived, never discovering where they went, never receiving a final goodbye. That human story lies at the heart of the Roanoke mystery. It is not simply a historical puzzle. It is the story of families separated forever by circumstances beyond their control. Modern historians generally agree on one important point. There is no convincing evidence that the entire colony disappeared overnight through one mysterious event. Instead, the settlers almost certainly adapted, relocated, divided into smaller groups, or gradually became part of neighboring Native American societies. In other words, the Lost Colony may not have been lost at all. It may simply have been absorbed into another culture until its separate identity disappeared. Ironically, that possibility may be even more remarkable than many fictional theories. History often changes not through dramatic moments, but through quiet acts of survival. People adapt, communities merge, languages change, cultures blend, generations pass. Eventually, only scattered clues remain. Roanoke reminds us how fragile historical evidence can be. If John White had returned only a few months earlier, the mystery might never have existed. If one colonist had written a diary explaining what happened, historians would have their answer. If storms had not delayed English ships, the colony's story might have been completely different. Instead, history left behind only a single carved word: CROATOAN. That one word has inspired more than 4 centuries of investigation. Perhaps future archaeology will uncover the missing settlement. Perhaps new DNA evidence will reveal descendants of the colonists. Perhaps underwater documents or forgotten documents will finally explain what happened. Or perhaps some questions will remain unanswered forever. That is the nature of history. Not every mystery receives a final solution. The Lost Colony of Roanoke continues to fascinate historians because it sits at the intersection of exploration, survival, hope, and uncertainty. It marks the beginning of England's long journey toward establishing colonies in North America, a journey that eventually led to Jamestown, the 13 colonies, and ultimately the creation of the United States. Yet before all of that, there was Roanoke, a small community, 115 settlers, a hopeful beginning, an unexpected disappearance, and a mystery that has endured for more than 430 years. The Lost Colony reminds us how fragile historical evidence can be. If John White had returned only a few months earlier, the mystery might never have existed. If one colonist had written a diary explaining what happened, historians would have their answer. If storms had not delayed English ships, the colony's story might have been completely different. Instead, history left behind only a single carved word: CROATOAN. That one word has inspired more than 4 centuries of investigation. Perhaps future archaeology will uncover the missing settlement. Perhaps new DNA evidence will reveal descendants of the colonists. Perhaps underwater documents or forgotten documents will finally explain what happened. Or perhaps some questions will remain unanswered forever. That is the nature of history. Not every mystery receives a final solution. The Lost Colony of Roanoke continues to fascinate historians because it sits at the intersection of exploration, survival, hope, and uncertainty. It marks the beginning of England's long journey toward establishing colonies in North America, a journey that eventually led to Jamestown, the 13 colonies, and ultimately the creation of the United States. Yet before all of that, there was Roanoke, a small community, 115 settlers, a hopeful beginning, an unexpected disappearance, and a mystery that has endured for more than 430 years.